Today's question is, what is the fastest you have ever seen a new coworker get fired?
But before we begin, it would help us a lot if you subscribed, since 97.5% of the people who watch our videos are not subscribed. So without further ado, let's start. As a teenager, I worked at a bowling alley. Within an hour, a new girl was fired on the spot for dropping a ball on the foot of a complaining patron. 4 or so hours. When I was 18, I got a job at a grocery store, along with 3 others. We all started training together. On the first day, we were training in the evening, and one girl asked to go home. She said her head hurt. They said fine. She clocked out, went to grab a grocery cart and started filling it with beer and liquor. The store manager walked over and asked her if she was having a party. She said yes. Didn't even try to come up with an excuse. Just, yeah, I am. So I needed to leave early on my first day. Basically, he fired her. He didn't show up the first day, second day, or third day. I had to work a double shift for 3 days straight. Not fun. I answered the phone when he finally called in on the 4th day. He said, "I'm going to be honest with you. I've been in Orlando. My parents paid for a small vacation as a reward for getting the job. Would it be okay to start next week instead of this week?" Guy got hired, went through training and all that jazz. First day on the floor, he disappeared for 3 hours and then came back high as fuck on like meth or something. A manager found him in the bathroom aisle, staring at himself in the mirror. Said manager looked at the cameras after firing him. The guy was there staring at himself for at least 30+ minutes. Before their first day on orientation, I got hired for a manufacturing job through Manpower, a temp agency. Me and a friend of my wife were both supposed to start on Monday at the plant for a week-long orientation. She got into a fender bender on her way to orientation and called them to say that she'd be a bit late, that she just needed to wait on the police to give a statement. The manager told her not to bother ever coming in. Girl was torn up. She took pictures and the police report in to the hiring manager, tried to explain things to the company HR managers, but no dice. She was fired before ever clocking in. This was a while ago at my old job. New guy gets hired as a busboy. He was super annoying and tried to insert himself into everyone's conversation whether they wanted him there or not. It only took a couple of hours for the whole restaurant to hate him. I was working the bar, and he kept eating the bar fruit. I personally didn't care, but the manager did. Manager comes over and tells him to stop eating the fruit. He looks the manager in the eye and eats another piece of fruit. Manager says, "Really?" followed by, "Come with me to the office." New guy promptly replies with, "All right, man, calm down. I can tell you got that big dick energy for a good reason," followed with cliche wink and nudge from his elbow. In front of me and like 4 other employees. I wanted to slam my face into the ice bin. It was so cringy to witness. He promptly walked out the front door 10 minutes later without his uniform on anymore. The worst thing about it was the manager was an insanely laid-back guy. Hell, the whole restaurant was insanely laid back. You really had to try hard to get fired from this place. Had he not thrown in that big dick line, I'm almost positive he would have just gotten a slap on the wrist and kept the job. I used to do a lot of field work on site investigation programs. Basically, we'd hang out on a drill rig while the drillers took rock cores. We'd log the cores, take photos, do some downhole tests, etc. New engineer gets sent to site and gets assigned the night shift. Some people love night shift, but most people don't, hence sticking the junior with night shift. After 5 nights, he calls the office and says he wants to come home because he's freezing and he hates it and he can't do it. Not clear to me if he quit or got fired, but it became plain pretty quickly that this job wasn't for him. I got pulled onto that program, and I asked the drillers what the guy's deal was. They had a propane heater in the back of their van, and despite repeated invitations to sit in the back of the van, Buddy just sat in his truck all night and shivered. In the middle of February. I got hired as a long-term temp with one other person to do some basic data entry work at a major brand pretty much everyone has heard of. And it was at their corporate headquarters, so pretty prestigious. Anyway, we went through all of this onboarding stuff in the morning that required us to get photo IDs and figure out parking and all that stuff. Then after 2 or 3 hours, we were introduced to one of the employees in our new department who began going over what we were going to be doing. None of it seemed overly difficult, and I figured that while it was new system I had never used before, I'd be able to work it out in a few days as long as I asked questions and took notes. And that was the thing that made me realize that the other person who got hired with me probably lied on her resume and was completely out of her depth. She didn't take any notes and didn't ask any questions. And whenever I glanced at her, I could see flashes of panic on her face. Well, lunchtime came, and when we came back, she said that another company had called her and offered her a permanent position and she couldn't work with us any longer. Both me and the person training us knew what was going on, but I'll give the other lady credit for finding a way out without losing face too badly. The takeaway here is, yes, fake it until you make it can and does work. But you gotta be able to fake it. You can't fake faking it. Spent my summers in college working as a laborer for a construction company. Anyway, we were doing a bunch of renovation in an active hospital, so noise and dust were a huge concern. We were a small crew and just starting renovations on an area with a super tight schedule, so the company hired a subcontractor for some of the work. Enter these 2 clowns who show up to do some demolition work. Foreman gives them the talk about how they may be used to doing things a certain way, but this is an active hospital, so he'd rather the work take longer than for them to make a huge mess or a lot of noise. An hour later, we apparently got multiple complaints about the noise and the mess, so the foreman calls me up and says to go over there and clean up now, and that he'd be by shortly to see what the hell was going on. These dudes had dust and broken wall everywhere. I could hear them halfway down the hall, just smashing away without a care in the world. The foreman shows up and we walk into the room to witness this dude standing on a pile of rubble, swinging a sledgehammer over his head at a brick wall that he's removed the bottom from. Somehow the rest of this wall is still hanging from the ceiling. I have no idea how. Guy wasn't even wearing a hard hat, apparently oblivious that at any moment that wall might give way and crush him. The foreman lost his fucking mind on these guys, kicked them out immediately, and got on the phone with their company and told them he didn't want to see these guys on site again. Lots of choice 4-letter words were used, even threatened to fire the subcontractor entirely and get someone else to do the work. I worked in a restaurant for my first job in high school. I was about 16 when we hired on my co-worker/buddy's little cousin. This kid was a year younger than me and a total shithead. No one liked him because of his attitude and behavior issues. Anyways, kid gets hired, and at first he's chill. Him and I both love the same band, so we had a mutual bond and common thing to talk about. Other than that, couldn't stand him much. But during his first week, he starts to step on people's toes quite easily because he notices some of us who are friends liked roasting each other, and he thought he could join in, but the comments he was making wasn't silly banter. It was full-blown rude comments that made some of us mad and get selective over when we joke back and forth with each other. We also started to notice this kid didn't do his job properly either. He worked dish pit when working alone, and his lack of proper cleaning of dishes, cutlery, and etc. threw everyone behind on their closing tasks cause we'd have to ask him to rewash everything due to food chunks being all over things. After 2-3 weeks, a number of us complained to management. This kid's older cousin even complained about him, it got so bad. The last straw, I think, for him was taking this dishwasher sprayer and started to spray people as they walked into the kitchen. He got screamed at by a number of us and was fired a few days later when it was brought to management and noticed how angry all of us were with this kid. I owned a construction business and we recently hired 3 new employees due to expansion. I didn't get to meet them yet as my business partner was the one who interviewed them and watched them get started on the first day and would check in on them most mornings. Along with the new hired, we promoted one of our best workers to manager to oversee them. So after a few days, I noticed that we were behind schedule on the job. This wasn't all that surprising because we had the new hires, but I decided it's best to go in and check it out and make sure everything was going well. So I call up my manager and tell him to go to a different site. We did multiple sites each day, and that I will take over at the place with the new guys. I arrive at the site half an hour late due to traffic, and everyone is already hard at work. And in fact, they are working efficiently and correctly on everything. I ask them a few questions about what they are doing and so on and get all the right answers. I figured the delay was just the first 2 days of learning, and am very pleased that everything was picked up and seemed to go well. Now it is important that at this point I didn't actually introduce myself, and nobody asked who I was, so it seems everyone just assumed that I was just another worker from the company they never met before. So 2 hours before we are supposed to finish for the day, a guy comes over and says, "Hey, just so you know, we're all gonna head out now, but clock in that we worked the whole day." Manager allows it, and the owners never notice. So that is the story of how I fired 3 new hires on the first day I met them, and also how I had to fire our best worker. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you like the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.